Very warm welcome to our viewers. I'm Francis Hurt, standing in for Tendeka Nobule Mbeki. This is Economics Unbound. Welcome to it. Well, tonight we're talking about jobs. Of course, in South Africa, the big issue is a lack of jobs. More than half of all young people hoping to get a start in life are simply unable to find any sort of paid work. Well, the president today has received a report on last year's Jobs Summit. We'll bring you the latest. We'll also chat to union leaders Welenzima Vavi, and if you haven't saved, your options are limited. But later we'll talk about some of the things that you can do if you are retrenched and some of the things that companies in South Africa should be doing. Overall, unfortunately, the situation is desperate, isn't it, Nana?
Hello, Francis, and welcome to our viewers. South Africa's unemployment rate is reported to be one of the highest in the world. South Africa's current unemployment stands at a catastrophic 29%, and companies continue to retrench. This causes a national crisis that feeds into South Africa's socio-economic challenges like poverty and inequality.
Exactly, Nana, and given those struggles that you're talking about, there is possible retrenchments looming across various sectors. Government, of course, has resisted mass job losses in state-owned companies, but given the loss at Eskom this week that was reported and a different tone coming from Treasury, that could change. Let's quickly put the unemployment rate of 29% announced this week into some context for you. It is the highest number since 2008 when SABC started collecting jobs data on a quarterly basis. Let's bring that up. That was 11 years ago on a quarterly basis. We're at the highest. But if you actually go back in time, it's even worse. If we look at the stats that used to be collected on a different basis here, you'll see that this, in fact, where we are now is the worst number since 2003, which was 16 years ago. In the first few months, around about here of 2003, unemployment hit an all-time high of 31.2%. We're not there, but 29%, not very far from that record, Nana.
But Francis, what are the causes of South Africa's job crisis and what can be done about it?
So, few factors, Nana. We have to start with education. Literacy and numeracy gauges show South Africa is falling very far behind. Kids are simply not growing up with the skills required in a fast-changing economy. Of course, we need to confront the legacies of our past. Experts point out that under apartheid, state policy was to remove black people from cities and to prevent them from acquiring skills or getting high-status jobs. This caused an oversupply of cheap labour, which benefited the owners of business enterprises, particularly in agriculture and mining. Then you'll hear economists talk about structural issues holding back the economy, saying reform is needed. There they're talking about things like a shortage of power, things like red tape, the time it takes to open a business, to get a license. And the current administration has also promised to address policy uncertainty. One of the biggest factors affected by that, the biggest sectors rather, is mining. And of course, there have been job losses there. Miners reorientating their operations to other countries. Now, here's an example. The former mining minister publishing a mining charter that changed black ownership requirements from 26% to 30%. The problem there was that miners only had a year to find new BEE partners. They said that was impossible, and the matter went to court. Well, the publication of a new mining charter last year has provided some certainty, but shortly we'll talk about the strikes that continue to plague the sector. Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi says 77 projects have been identified to help save jobs. Today, President Cyril Ramaphosa received a report on the progress made since the Jobs Summit. Well, in October last year, the President's Jobs Summit was convened to address South Africa's soaring unemployment rate. Even then, the delegates discussed ways to grow the economy. Well, today's report comes from the National Economic Development and Labour Council, or NEDLAC, that brings government, business unions and civil society to one table. It briefed the President on the issues that have been followed up following that Jobs Summit. Nxesi says the report will be made public in a few days to allow South Africans to engage with it.
Two big issues which have emerged today is the issue of electricity and the pricing of electricity. Hence, the ESCOM also, what is going on in terms of dealing with ESCOM, turning it around became a big issue. And the other issue which emerged was the issue of the water licensing. Those were the very, very big issues we talked about. As a result of that, the president has taken extraordinary measures to say, instead of meeting as NEDLAC, dealing with these issues on a quarterly basis, now he has instructed that he's going to lead to meet on a monthly basis every first week of the month. The president will be meeting, and then we're going to be drawing a plan talking about the timelines, when certain issues have to be met, and talking about the milestones. So it became very clear that all the departments now who are responsible are going to be made to account on everything. So there are a number of issues which have been put to e-government, put to the different stakeholders, and also for us to be able to say the program now is running. It's not going to be, there will be no excuses. Every ministry now knows what is the brief, and we'll just have to deliver and keep on reporting on a monthly basis what we have been able to achieve.
So now, if we talk about impediments to job creation in South Africa, another big debate is around our labour laws. Some want even more protection for workers. Others believe that South African labour laws are too rigid, making it hard to hire and fire workers, therefore discouraging businesses perhaps from taking on more staff. Then there's a question, is organised labour holding South Africa to ransom? We're seeing very protracted strike action. For more, I'm now joined in studio by Trade Union Federation SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Great to have you with us, Mr. Vavi.
Thank you very much for having us.
So, as far as I can remember, SAFTU is not a part of NEDLAC. There was some controversy around that. But are you excited about this report, something coming out of the Job Summit convened by the President last year?
Well, we have been excluded from NEDLAC deliberately by factionalists who have some axe to grind with us and who hate the fact that we have created an independent, democratic campaigning.
Are you blaming COSATU?
Of course, it was not only acting alone. It was COSATU, FEDUSA and NACTU. But that decision to exclude us was also endorsed by business and government at the level of the executive. They've given us a 2 years period, a 2 years that was never part of the rules of NEDLAC, specially designed to exclude the militant SAFTU. And I don't know what they hope to achieve out of that.
So 2 years before you can join?
That 2 years have ended. But then they have another condition. The condition was that we must produce a 2-year audited financial statement, which we will conclude in the coming week, and we will have the executive on the 21st, and then we'll submit a new application, and I don't know what they're going to say, but they're quite determined to build this exclusive club of people who essentially agree with one another, who see no crisis of out of what is happening in South Africa, who are embarking in international trips together, who are in Geneva together.
How can anyone not see a crisis when unemployment is at 29%?
South Africa was in a crisis before 1994, and that crisis have remained with us post-1994. The disappointing part is that that crisis is worsening all the time. Unemployment rate now at 38.5%, because that's what the figure, the realistic figure is. The expanded definition that includes all workers who are discouraged, who are no longer waking up every morning to try and try their luck in the factory gates. They are 38.5%. That 38.5% itself is a misrepresentation, because it includes everybody waking up to go and sell bananas in the corner of the street somewhere in our townships. They counted as employed. So if we were to address the issue or count the underemployment factor in those statistics, we think that 38.5 will increase further, maybe towards 40%. You remember, at the worst point of our crisis in 2002, we had an unemployment rate that reached 42%. We are so close to that worst record of 2002. And the disappointing part is that was 15, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
we showed earlier 31%, the official rate in 2003, the early part of 2003. Let me just go back to this NEDLAC report given to the President today. We don't have much information, but the Labour Minister was saying that electricity prices, a big issue, water licenses. There have been calls for a coordinated approach around Eskom, blocking business from growing. Are you willing to welcome that? Something big? Are you hopeful this can address the problem?
We want and we refuse to participate in the NEDLAC organized worker summit because we invited to it a week before or so. And it was quite clear that we were being brought in to come and rubber stamp something that have been negotiated behind the backs of workers for many months. So we refused to go in. And we were right, we think, because we think that NEDLAC package is a typical business as usual. They don't have a sense of the crisis because they are not sitting in front of the crisis.
So give me a workable solution for Eskom. What does have to want to happen around Eskom? I mean, like my colleague said earlier, so we can say electricity prices are hampering business, hampering employment, therefore, hampering every man and woman on the street in this country, but Eskom is making a huge loss. How do you deal with something like that?
Put in management that knows Eskom. Don't bring in strangers there who are then found wanting for years and who don't know whether it is black or white or dark or blue, and who have to learn ropes and before they find their way around how to manage that institution. We believe that inside Eskom, they have to be, and there ought to be, men and women who have been developed within the system, who have been given experience and who have been given exposure, who hold very senior positions, who are being sidelined for what we usually call the tried and tested somewhere else, but who just don't know that institution. Yeah. People like Pagamani Hadebe who have to walk away and leave Eskom in a worse situation than he found it. And people like Jabu Mabuza who have just been given a position to hold both the chairperson and the CEO, who have a background outside Eskom, who I guess have to know the ropes inside Eskom before he can find out what is to be done. So the problem of South Africa is that we have this rotational system of the door. We come this door, you come out of the other door, and you come back. And we just keep on rotating the same leaders in parliament, in the executive, and in the state institutions. And we sideline the skilled technocrats who we believe can take this institution in a different direction than they are now. Now look at what have happened in Eskom. Under the stewardship of people who were brought inside, they have now lost 20.7 billion rands in the financial year. And you know what we do in response to that? We give them more responsibilities. Yeah.
Well, we're talking tonight around these structural issues that are with the economy. Let me talk about labor, because everybody wants this jobs crisis to be fixed. A debate around whether organized labor helps or hinders that. Surely we have to admit that the very poor relationship between labor and business must be a deterrent somewhere to investment, to the expansion of jobs.
We must address labor relations. It's a matter of must. And I believe that if we were to look at the statistics, if we were to look at the facts, the number of days lost as a result of the strike action post-1994 have come down tremendously. And
Can I stop you there? Can I stop you there? Wait, there was a 5 5-month strike in the gold mining industry.
That's
from
an
November to
isolated
the
one.
first part of
Compare
this
those
5-month strike.
compare those men days lost as a result of strike to a period before 1994 when the unemployment, the poverty and inequalities were not as pronounced as they are today. But the power of these minority, the 1% that controls the economy, in particular their control of the media, is that they keep on repeating the same lies over and over until it settles as the truth in the minds of many ordinary South Africans. Here are the lies that they keep on telling us. They say the labor market in South Africa is too rigid, but they will never tell you which aspects of the labor laws that must be getting rid of to make our labor laws more flexible. They won't say remove the maternity leave, let workers not have an overtime, or let workers not have a hearing. They just
I
keep
did
on
speak to a
generalizing.
mining boss once, Mark Kutifani, and we know Anglo has actually taken a lot of their operations abroad, and he was saying they were begging for more flexibility in the hours that workers could work. So they didn't have to work more hours, but maybe, I think he was talking about Sunday nights or strange
But all mines
hours,
in South Africa,
and that was
you see
outlawed.
No. That's a propaganda again.
That's what he told me. I'm not spewing propaganda.
Every mine in South
Mr.
Africa
Vavi,
is already
the
a
WEF,
7-day. Let me deal with this. Every mine operation is a 7-day operation. Workers are working 2-3 shifts overnight, deep under the belly of the earth, and for peanuts in comparison to what the CEOs of these companies are earning. South Africa is not having a discussion about what is that we're doing about the levels of inequalities in pay. What are we doing about these exorbitant salaries of the CEO in comparison to these very, very low salaries of the workers who are actually responsible for the productions of these firms? That discussion gets hidden, and we get told that our labor market is too much inflexible. We got told that the company taxes are too high, and yet when you go to the statistics provided by the World Bank and the IMF, you will see that that's just a nonsense propaganda again, but it kept on being repeated until everybody believes it. We get told that our GDP, our debt to our GDP is extraordinarily high and out of hand, and very soon will be at the doors of the IMF and the World Bank. When you look at the statistics given to us by the IMF and World Bank, you will see that that's actually a lie. We are not
close to
worse
50%
off
of
than other many
GDP
countries
is not a
in the
problem
same
to you.
economic conditions as South
Debt
Africa.
of close to 50% of GDP, I think that's where we are
But
now.
in
Not a
Japan,
problem.
they are 212%. In the United States of America, they are 108%.
We're a small economy.
But
Mr. Vavi,
compare us with other middle-income countries, you will get the same story, that our GDP ratio to our debt is not out of hand. But the neoliberals, the people who are owning the economy, the 1% powerful people who can hire experts to come and repeat their lies, are telling us all the time.
Well, we've given you this media platform. You were complaining about media earlier.
That's why
Thank you
I
for
jump
being
every
here.
time. But we must expose these lies
and let's
all
talk
the
again.
time.
We have to stop there, but I hear what you're saying, basically, that labour laws are not the issue. That was the opinion of the General Secretary of Trade Union Federation, SAFTU, Zwelinzima Vavi.
After the short break, stay with us. What should you do to avoid getting ill?
Eat healthy, not to do drugs, not to smoke.
To learn more about some of the most common illnesses and how to avoid them, join Dr. Silomo Daung each week and get all your health questions answered by experts.
What are those signs that people should look out for and say, this is time for me to go and seek help?
It is very important to identify and address those problems as early as possible.
You are a fighter, you are a warrior, and you will get better.
Right here on Health Talk.
I want to insist there is no turning back on the issue of e-tolls. It wasn't for elections. It wasn't for elections. The e-tolls have no future in Gauteng. It wasn't for elections.
How does COSATU think this e-toll saga then should be handled? I mean, the gantries are there and the government incurred huge debts installing this.
It was not workers and the people of this province who said they must go and look for loans to come and toll these roads. Government is going to listen to the people.
The majority of South Africans have spoken. We are not happy about paying.
The e-toll system was a good idea, but the way they implemented it, they just went about it wrong.
I'm looking forward now to leading that process with my colleagues and finalize within the timeframes that have been set by the President.
Welcome back to Economics Unbound. We're talking about the scourge of joblessness in South Africa. And this isn't only about the economy. There are huge social ramifications when more than 1 in 2 young people, more than half of those young people simply cannot find a job. After years, many give up looking. Unemployment is close to a record high. We were talking about that earlier. And there are also retrenchments looming in various sectors. To discuss, I'm joined by Anne Cabot-Alitzhauser, Head of Alexander Forbes Research Institute. Thank you for being with us, Anne. Your surname's a mouthful. Can I call you Anne? And you wanted to follow up to what Zwelinzima Vavi was saying from SAFTU earlier.
Well, actually, he was kind of ducking the question. We were kind of talking about job creation, and where I wanted to jump in is kind of a different angle. We focus so much on youth unemployment, and we don't ask the question of where productivity and job creation can come from. And sitting on the other side of the fence, which we tend to be paying less attention to, is people going into retirement and retrenchment. So I'm a big fan of Ricardo Hausmann, and he's been here recently giving advice as to what we should be doing as an economy. And he's saying that we're on the verge of making an historic mistake if we don't pay attention to what he calls the secret sauce of productivity. So what's the secret sauce? And this really speaks to the whole fourth industrial revolution challenge that we're about ready to face. He says the secret sauce is not necessarily education down here. I'm not talking about early childhood development. It's know-how. Now, where do people develop know-how? They typically develop know-how on the job. So let's get back to these people that are being retrenched and retired. And you're seeing a kind of hollowing out of skills that are taking place. Now, our president gets up and he says, we need to have an entrepreneurship economy in order to be able to meet the challenge of a global, fourth industrial revolution. Well, if you look at the statistics about successful and sustainable entrepreneurship, it's typically people over the age of 55 who run these small businesses that succeed. And why is that the case? It's the case because these are the people with skills and know-how.
Which they've learned in a normal average job. So very quickly, what's the solution then? I know this debate has been going on since the Mandela years, when teachers were retrenched. You say, why weren't they put in townships to mentor upcoming teachers?
And I think we can do so much more. And I'm actually trying to find a way to actually build it into an employee benefit rather than just saving for retirement, because we had George Friedman here recently for the Digital Economic Summit, and he was arguing, we have longevity going on all around the world. It's not just a first world phenomenon. We have longevity and moving up of age of mortality in South Africa as well. And the secret is not to get people to save longer for a longer retirement. The secret is to get people to be more productive for longer and get them back in. So what could be a benefit that you give somebody is the benefit of an ongoing skills acquisition, so that when they do leave, whether they're going to be retrenched because robotics is coming in and taking their jobs, or whether or not they're going to be retired simply because there are some silly rules that says you have to leave at 63 that make no sense whatsoever and are 150 years out of date. Why are companies not doing more to make sure these people can become part of the economic system and be that growth engine that we need in the smaller businesses? Yes, we have problems with oligopolies and big businesses not opening up to smaller businesses. But we have a bigger problem in that we cannot possibly envisage small businesses to succeed unless we bring skills back into that space. And they will be the ones that will take the chance to employ youth.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting dynamic.
This sounds fascinating, but in the meantime, I mean, the thing we've got to talk about is that people are going to face retrenchments, maybe in the next few months in South Africa. A lot of sectors, maybe SOEs, and the stats coming out, 92% of South Africans aren't even prepared for retirement. So retrenchment is huge.
That's a fallacious number. I'm sorry, but it comes from the notion that 92% haven't saved, 75%.
Enough, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's a problem as long as they can still have income. But so what can companies do? Let's jump right in here. First of all, the knowledge that you have, having worked for 30 years or 25 years or whenever it is that you're retrenched, your degrees have absolutely no relevance anymore. So what I need to be able to do as an employer to help you to the next phase is to be able to do a kind of an aptitude test, a skills assessment.
Sure.
It's not just what the job was that you left, it's what you're capable of doing. And the thing is as you get older, you actually really do get wiser. You can connect the dots in ways that young people simply can't, which makes you hugely valuable. So what are those skills that you have acquired in terms of that connectivity, that experiential thing that could be put to use? Now, maybe it could be entrepreneurial, but maybe you're not the entrepreneurial type. So then how do you then become a mentor? How do you become there's so many different ways to bring that knowledge base that Hausman talks about back into the economy. And that's where we're missing the opportunity. And employers can do much more to support.
And should employers retain these workers or sort of set them loose, but give them some support? That's what you're saying. It goes beyond finances.
I think there are two things employers need to do. Yes, you can create a different type of benefit structure that really encourages ongoing learning in the job. I mean, I had a company the other day that we were working with who did a fascinating thing with the fact that they knew they were going to have to retrench 500 people because they were bringing robotics in. But they made sure that these people had access to a kind of 4-5 year period of skills development, knowing that this was eventually going to happen, so that they could move off into different, employment opportunities. So maybe it's a strategic positioning that companies need to have that says, a mindset that says, what segment of my business is likely to get automated, and how can I take that population and redeploy them, even if it's not in my company, maybe it's in my supply chain, my enterprise development.
Reskill or upskill. We have to leave it there. I wish we had more time to chat, and I hope we chat again. Thank you very much. That was Anne Cabot-Aletzhauser, head of Alexander Forbes Research Institute. And that's unfortunately where we have to leave it tonight. Tendeka Ngombule Mbeki will be back with you next week. Thank you for being with me tonight. Good night.